everyone. I'm Jim Dempsey. I'm the chairman of the Airport Advisory Board, and I'm going to call this special meeting of the Airport Advisory Board, March 7th, 2024, to 2 p.m. to order. Jacob, would you call the roll, please?
All right, Chair Dempsey.
Here.
Vice Chair Starley.
Here.
Member Lester. Here. Member Mabe.
Here.
Member Norval.
Here.
Member Caudell.
Here.
All right. For the new folks here, Tim Caudell, this is his first session with us, first time up on the podium as an Airport Advisory Board member. We're excited to have him join our ranks, and I'll pull this over a little closer. I'm getting waved at. And we'll do a more formal introduction and let you do a little bit of a bio next time we actually have a full-blown board meeting. This is kind of a working session, all right? The meeting today is, all right, I'll let these folks come in, okay. The meeting today is a result of a presentation that was provided by Environmental Science Associates, ESA, to the commission members on the 27th of February, where they presented the results of a noise analysis that they had completed, a follow-on to the one that was originally done back in 2011. We had another one that was done in 2023, and they presented the findings of that to the commission, mayor and the commission members on the evening of the 27th, and in that meeting there was a recommendation for the Airport Advisory Board to meet and consider the next steps and recommendations that were presented by ESA. And we've got those up on the board here, and we're going to work our way through each one of those individual line items on that. So that's the purpose of what we're up here today. We expect to make some motions and recommendations that the airport administrative team will take and go away and act on as a result of this meeting. But prior to that, the next item on our menu is public participation. If we have anyone who would like to address the board, make a public comment, you're welcome to do that now. We will limit the comment to 3 minutes as per the city policy on public participation. And do we have anyone interested in making any comment? Okay, all right, good, awesome. I was hoping we would have a lot of time to go through these individual items. Okay, so my thinking on this is to take each one of these individually and in order. Okay. All right, welcome. Glad to have you join us today. We're still at the point of public participation if anybody wants to make a comment at this time. Okay, if you would like to come up here and introduce yourself, you'll have 3 minutes to do that. At 1 minute, as soon as I press this button, your light will come on and you can get started with your introduction and your comments. And at 1 minute, the yellow light will come on, and then the red light will start flashing when your 3 minutes is up.
It's very difficult to get much said inside of 3 minutes. But I thought this was more of a public participation meeting because there's a lot more noise at this airport than most of any of you realize, and especially over the west, over the county residents. It is ungodly. They flew yesterday morning from 8 o'clock in the morning until after midnight last night. They flew nonstop touch and goes until 10 p.m. And then they did long reach loops until after midnight. Mm-hmm. You don't understand. When the tower went in back in late 2004, early 2005, and they upgraded those runways, they directed all of the patterns over the county residents to the west, taking most of the noise impact off of all of the city residents, all of the voters for the city commission and all of the city officials. There is a noise impact I have over 100 signatures of impacted residents around this airport. I know they're claiming that the noise levels have dropped. I don't know where they're finding that, because it's just as bad as it's always been. And if none of you realize it, I mean, all of you love planes, I get it. But can you imagine having over 90,000 planes per year, which is usually somewhere in the vicinity of 4 to 5 and sometimes 6 days a week, over your house? Any of you? I mean, think about that impact and how that would impact your health and your well-being and the quality of your life. It is an impact, and it needs to be addressed, and something more needs to be done. And they do need to choose a common runway that does not take off over anybody's homes. And 7 seems to be the only viable runway that would put them out over the water to be able to come back around, and that would reduce a lot of the noise. And stopping the left-hand turns off of runway 29 and runway 25 every night after dark. That is unbearable. Every single night you sit down to relax in front of the TV, and all of a sudden the planes are flying right over your house and interrupting the antenna reception. So now you can't even enjoy watching television in your own home in the evening. So it's nonstop, it's all day. It's impacted every single aspect of our lives. Something more needs to be done, and you need to resurrect the Noise Abatement Committee, because not enough can get resolved in 3 minutes in front of all of you.
Okay.
You've got to bring that committee back.
Thank
so
you very
that we
much.
can
We
work out these
we
issues.
appreciate the comments. Thank you. You, sir, would like to speak as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. If you just introduce yourself and I'll...
Charles Radigan, Scarlet Trail.
Oh.
90,000 a year, huh? And that's now. What was the bottom line of the last noise study? Was there anything done for the residents around the area?
The public participation portion is for you to present to us. We're not...
Well, I can't ask any
There's not a
questions.
dialogue that we can have here. Now, we're just going to take action.
I can't ask any questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it appears to me that the last time there wasn't any answers that came about the study that actually affected the residents around the airport. I don't know how much money was spent. Probably a lot of money was spent on other agencies affiliated with the airport, so everybody made a little bit of money. What did it do for the residents? What part of if you were to put a 360-degree circle around New Smyrna, around the airport being the center, and say maybe a mile out or 3 miles out, how much of that got noticed by the people doing the survey? Was it just over a couple of neighborhoods, maybe 30% of the pie over here? Or did it go out in a radius all the way around the airport to get a full knowledge of the noise in and out of the airport at all times during the day and night? Weekends, holidays, doesn't seem to matter. What's being done for the residents? I know it's being done. We can clearly see what's happening with all the businesses flourishing at the airport. I mean, Epic is, how many planes they have now? Over 30? And there's less noise now than before? It doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it does to somebody.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate you bringing those to us. Okay.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Shane Williams, the Director of Flight Operations at Epic Flight Academy. First and foremost, I'd like to go ahead and thank all of you on the advisory board for taking time to continually meet and look into these needs of noise and things going on at the airport. Secondly, to the airport manager and the assistant, Jacob and Arvin, Thank you guys as well for continually meeting. Epic is incredibly excited to continue working, not only with the airport, but with the advisory board each month, looking at data and things that we have now started collecting for about 13, 14 months now. I feel that we've made some improvements. I think we can say that the noise in terms of violations and flyovers and things like that have trended down. In terms of our thoughts on the recommendations, the Comwin runway, we have no issues with that. If we all can agree and think that there is a specific runway going forward that we can use either in the morning or at night when the towers are closed or even when the tower does open, we have no issues with that, and we would love to try to push forward to make that happen. I know I've spoken with Arvin a little bit on raising the pattern altitude. I think there's a little bit of homework per se that needs to be done with the FAA to make those things happen. I know one thing that we are just slightly concerned with is if we do it and for some reason it has a negative impact, how easy is it to reverse those changes to go back from 1,000 back down to 800. So that was really our only concern with that. But other than that, we have no issues as well. We'd love to see the pattern go up to 1,000, maybe make that noise a little bit higher, or the airplanes a little bit higher to give less noise. On the downside, climbing to 800 versus climbing to 1,000, that may increase the noise on the climb portions for the upwind. So I know I've spoken, we spoke the other day when we met about the kind of simplifying the procedures. We just need to kind of clarify that and make things a little bit more black and white, but we don't have any issues as well looking at number 3 for that. Again, continuing the education and going on down the list, that's what this is all about. We have no issues continuing to educate the general public and the surrounding area, as well as educating our own staff, our own students, and the people that are flying these airplanes. We do have an incredible amount of turnover, both students and instructors. As we all know, the airlines are hiring pilots at an incredible rate. So that's one battle that we deal with internally. But we feel that we've made some improvements and some pretty good progress in that as well. So to us, a lot of these recommendations look okay, and we'd be more than happy to participate to try to make some of them happen. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yes, sir. If you'd like to come up. If you just introduce yourself so we can make a record of it.
My name is Corey Lynch. I moved to New Smyrna Beach in 2015, and one of the criteria was there was an airport here. I fly airplanes for a living, and I use this airport to get to and from work. I understand that it's part of our transportation system, this airport, just like Route 1, the railroad, and the highways that cut through our town. I believe there's people that just want to get rid of the railroad, get rid of the airport, and this is just their first toehold to close the airport. This airport, from the state, it supposedly generates 1,700 jobs and a payroll of $80 million a year. And it benefits other people in the community, not just us. There's people that work at the airport. That's how they make their livelihood. Also, from the FAA, the average noise of a single-engine airplane is around 65 decibels. Heavy traffic, which would consider Route 1, heavy traffic, street traffic is 85 decibels. I rent 2 hangars at the airport, T hangars with little airplanes, and the motorcycles going by and the trucks going by on Route 1 are just as loud, if not louder, than any airplane. So if we're going to close the airport, we should close Route 1 from 8 to 5 o'clock at night in the morning. I think we should get rid of all these restrictions to the airport. I think you're going the wrong way. This airport's delivering pilots. There's mechanics that are learning to train here. It's important to the community and to our country, the state of Florida. Most of our visitors come to this state via airplane. It's like 50%. That's how they get here. This is part of our town. People come here for the beach, and I think this is just the first start. They've already done this, and this is not enough. They want more restrictions. I think we should remove all the restrictions. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you for your comments. We appreciate you doing that. All right. Anyone else? Anyone else? Public participation? Okay, we're going to close that part. We'll move on to 3, the special meeting itself. As I mentioned, we were tasked during the February 27th ESA briefing to the commission to take the next steps and recommendations. We've got them up on the screen so everybody can see them. Hopefully there were folks that are here today that had the opportunity to come and participate in that and hear the whole presentation. This entire presentation is on the airport. Is this on the airport website or
Yes,
is this
it
on
is.
the city?
Airport website,
Airport website.
nsbairport.com.
Okay. So if anyone did not get to see this whole package, it's available on the airport website. All right, so beginning with the first item, designate a calm wind runway. Arvin, would you mind just taking a minute and explain to everybody what that means?
So by designating a common runway, so what that means is that some airports have formally designated a runway that would be used if the winds were less than, I believe it's 4 knots or 4 knots and under, 5 knots and under. And that's something that we don't currently have. So a lot of times if the tower's not open or whatnot and we have that calm wind scenario, then maybe there's an opportunity there for us to designate where we want aircraft to take off that would benefit the community in a way that would reduce noise over, we're surrounded by communities on all sides, so there's not many options, but this is why this recommendation is here.
Do any of the board members have any question for Arvin on this item, designating a calm wind runway?
In terms of the noise studies that have been done, or has there been any analysis that would point to a particular runway generating less noise than another?
The study did not include that information. The idea was to spread the noise out a little bit if possible. When we look at what runway is most commonly used, runway 7 is the most heavily trafficked runway. By like 60% of the traffic is on runway 7, taking off and landing. That's just the function of because you have those offshore winds. So to designate a runway 7, that might increase the number of takeoffs and landings on that runway. Then again, there are fewer communities off the end of the departure end of 7 than there are off the departure end of 25, 20, et cetera. So that would be something that you all could discuss and consider, and we could even, do a trial period on it and see how it works. We certainly don't want to make designated runway and then that be counterproductive or cause safety issues or cause even more noise complaints. So the goal is to, minimize it. If you have a question related to how that would impact the air traffic control flow, Jim Zeiler is here. He could answer a question specific to that. But in preliminary discussions with him, he's open. And, we could certainly try anything to make sure that it works before we actually formally designate it. And this is something that is a little easier to undo. If we found that, just by formalizing this calm wind runway, it's still voluntary. So this is still something that we're going to publish, but it doesn't require FAA approval. It just requires coordination between the users. So if in 90 days we determine, hey, this runway is not working for anybody, we need to change it, we can do that.
Thank you, Arvin. Appreciate that. I should have made myself a little bit more clear on the process that we're going to use here is, for example, this designate a calm wind runway. We're going to discuss it. We can ask questions of Arvin. We can ask questions of Jim. We can discuss it amongst ourselves. But at the end, I'd like for us to make a motion that gets seconded that goes to the airport staff, Arvin and Jacob, that says, go do this, okay? Go work with the tower, determine if we have a calm wind runway that is appropriate to helping with this recommendation, let's get it identified. Let's figure out when we could implement that. So we want to have a motion at some point that says we're either going to do these or we're going to recommend that it would recommend that they not be done, or it would recommend that the airport staff go and act on it. Okay, so when we're comfortable and everybody understands it good enough, we'll make a motion on it and send it to them for action. Okay. Any other board discussion designated.
Yeah,
common
I've
runway.
actually got a question on that, Arvin. In respect to residents, nobody in the community would like an airplane to crash to their home. More so, I think they'd rather hear noise than an airplane crash to their home and risk lives. I don't think either one of them are great by any stretch of the imagination, but in regards to safety for pilots that are also flying, one of the concerns is we don't have access other than I know of 2-9 for night use for an RNAV approach under weather conditions, which we tend to get for many months convection fog. We tend to get a lot of weather issues because we are close to the coast. So to keep safety for our community, where are we in retrospect to opening up 725 for an RNAV approach into there in the evenings?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's, I'll try to be brief on it so that but in summary, the FAA took away those night approaches about, I think it was almost 2 years, and out of nowhere. There was no warning. What they had determined was they had done a survey, and they had determined that the runway ends on 725. The street, US 1 and Sunset, were actual penetrations to the OFZ, which is the obstacle-free area. And per FAA regs, there can't be anything that's not fixed by function in those obstacle-free areas. So the fence itself on both of those ends becomes a penetration. And so that's why we lost those night RNAV approaches. So the solution, unfortunately, we spent several months. In fact, we had a special workshop here discussing this very issue. The only solution is to take about 130 feet of pavement total off the ends of the runway. Now it's total, so one end is about, or 110 I think it is, so one end is about 60 and one's about 50. Doesn't change the displaced thresholds. It does change the distance, but once that's corrected, those approaches will be back. That project is being designed now. It's in the design phase, and its construction will begin about 1 year. And it's taken us this long to get that ball in motion. So, in short, yeah, that will be fixed, but it's not an immediate fix, because even the removing of the fence, then the road becomes the obstacle. And it's not just the road, it's the potential of a vehicle on the road. They count it as that. So like the max height of a semi-truck, basically.
Thank you.
Is runway 29 affected by that as well?
No, the approach to 29 is still
night.
nighttime, yeah. It's the only one we have, and it's not ideal.
Any further discussion on designating a calm wind runway?
Well, the runways being seasonal and weather predicted on what runway you're using. But for the 30-plus years I've been in business on the airport, 725 has always seemed to be the calm wind runway. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would suggest making 725 the calm wind runway. One, because at this time it's the longest. It's been recently, in the past 8 years, 10 years, resurfaced. Where 220 is not in bad shape, but could use improvements. 1129 has been recently resurfaced. But 725 just seems, especially in the summer with the sea collision, or not sea collision, but the wind out of the east or out of the west during thunderstorms, I mean, it seems to be the preferred calm wind runway.
Okay. Would you like to put that into words for a motion?
I make a motion that calm wind runway stays as 725.
Second.
I think you have to designate, excuse me, you have to designate one or the other, so 7 or 25. There's also, I'm sorry, I just want to throw this out there too. This is just to consider. in fact, if I could have Jim come up and explain this a little bit better than I can, but explain how runways, because we have 3 runways, can you explain a little bit about how if we designate 7, we also may need to consider that 1-1 would also be used simultaneously, vice versa if we designated 2-5, how 2-0 would be needed.
Yes, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Thank
Would
you,
just,
board.
for everyone else, would you just introduce yourself and your
My
position?
name is Jim Zeiler. I'm the air traffic manager at New Smyrna Beach Tower and have been for almost 9 years now, 31 years with the FAA prior. With regards to the calm wind, the concerns from an air traffic standpoint, because there's traffic pattern work, if we go to a calm wind and we designate one runway as a calm wind runway, then the question begins, if we're doing pattern on runway 7, sometimes I wonder, are we going to generate more problems than we're expecting? Have somebody on downwind, we've got several airplanes waiting, what do we do? 360 on downwind, what have we done? Generated a tremendous amount more noise from that one airplane in the pattern. So my concern would be on designating a runway versus a direction. In general, we work on an east operation or a west operation. When we're on an east operation, traditionally with the winds, if they allow it, we run the pattern on runway 7, left-hand pattern because we want to keep that to the north away from the departures. Departures depart 1-1, and then at times we can land 2 airplanes simultaneously on 7 and 2. They're converging, non-intersecting runways. So frequently if somebody's coming in from the south that wants to make a full stop, we bring them in and have them land runway 2 full stop, and typically if we don't have the spacing with the airplane in the pattern on runway 7, we'll have the airplane on runway 7 land full stop. Same token on the opposite direction. So the concern is if we suddenly say it's one runway when it's calm wind, and it would depend how it's worded and how much flexibility there is from an air traffic standpoint. Do I now extend my downwind further, which causes more noise, extend my upwind further? Another consideration I think you all ought to consider, if we suddenly depart large numbers of airplanes off runway 7, in all likelihood, right now typically they want to go to the southwest, but they're likely to going to be forced to the ocean or the shoreline southbound. You may be generating more of a noise issue for people that'll live along the coastline than you're anticipating. Right now, the coastline doesn't see them. They depart 1-1, turn away to the south practice area, or they depart 2-0, turn toward the south practice area. And the coastline doesn't see it. So all I would urge you is sometimes the solution may seem simple, but it may be more complex and generate more problems than you're expecting.
Okay, all right, very good. Any questions for Jim?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was a good suggestion, though, that we might want to consider. Would you want to consider revising your motion to say a calm wind direction or runway direction, or and we also want to, I think in the motion, we want to include that we do it for some period of time, 60 to 90 days, so that we can evaluate the effect of it. Like you said, we could be impacting people at the coast, we could be impacting people in a different community. So we probably want to do something that we're suggesting we're going to evaluate. And it could be the motion say designate a calm wind runway or direction for a period of time, 60 to 90 days, to determine the effectiveness. Is that kind of where you want to go with that?
You know, when the hours when the tower is closed, just designating a calm wind runway is fairly common around the country that have part-time towers. But for the hours when the control tower is operating, I think a calm wind direction makes perfect sense, and I've seen the way you guys do it many years now, and it splits that
I would add
traffic
one
out.
more caveat that too on the calm wind, and it was designated when Mr. Caudill mentioned about the approach at night. If we go calm wind runway 7 and we don't designate night versus day, I have a calm wind, but I have IFR conditions, I go to 7 with no approach.
Okay.
Right, versus I go to RNAV 29 because that's the only way into New Smyrna. There's just a lot of competing when you,
Right.
and I think that's why the airport got away and they said, hey, let's let's try to have some flexibility in how we do it. And traditionally, the tower has, because the winds ultimately start to be out of the east. You know, we have a sea breeze kicking on a standard day. Again, wintertime changes that, thunderstorms change that. Traditionally, we'll start west operation, knowing full well by 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning we'll be east. In our minds, that's efficient because the flight school does their run-ups, goes to runway 20 and departs, and basically is heading right to their practice area. Minimum amount of flight time, minimum amount of taxi time. So we think we're providing a service. Ultimately, if you all say, no, we want you to just take it to the east, okay. You know, I can do it either direction. But I would be very careful to specify one runway. I'd be very careful to do anything at nighttime until we have the ability to go back to do nighttime approaches to runway 7 and 25.
Okay.
We don't have.
All right.
So if calm wind runway outside of normal tower hours, that is a voluntary, is that correct?
Yes.
So if I'm coming in at night and I need to shoot an approach and 7 is the calm wind runway, well, I'm going to go ahead and shoot that approach to 29 because that's all I got.
I would be hesitant to place any constraint on runway usage when the tower's in operation. It seems to me that we're doing a couple of things. The first thing is the potential safety impact. It just imposes a constraint on their operational judgment. And I think that would be a mistake. And the second thing that inherently would do is put the airplane traffic and focus it over particular sections of the community. And I think that's kind of unfair. If we have multiple runway uses, you're less likely to get airplanes concentrated over any one a particular section. So as was suggested, doing something at night when the tower's not in operation might make sense, but I'd be very hesitant to proceed with constricting things when the tower is in operation.
Yeah, I actually want to speak on that. I actually fully agree with that statement because last thing I want to do is constrict a tower who is regulating traffic over our entire community. And I trust their judgment with radar far better than I do anybody else's on the ground. If they're seeing what's going on actively, I would never want to restrict something during the daytime hours in our community for the safety of our community, for the safety of our residents, and the safety of our pilots who are flying that are going to continue to fly. So nighttime, a standard for nighttime, I would be in favor of that, but not during the day. I trust the tower who has better eyes on that than we do.
Okay, well then why don't we do this? Why don't we revise the wording on that a little bit to make it runway/direction. The direction is for the airport to work with the tower on this. Mm-hmm. And I think there's, our commitment here, number one, is safety in everything we do. Every decision we make has to be driven safety first because of the business we're in here. So I think that all of these things that were brought up, the tower, nighttime, runway/direction or runway versus direction, all that needs to be worked out between you guys and come back with a recommendation to us if this is how we'd like to answer this question.
I think there has to also be a disclaimer in there, Arvin, and I'm sorry. Joe, I think there has to be a disclaimer in there because it also needs to state weather permitting. If we're going to put a standard, there has to be something that says weather permitting under non-towered conditions.
Okay. So, you want to go back at that one more time with the wording? Because you already threw a motion out, and I don't know if it was seconded or not.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't. You want to revise the motion? Or you want me to?
You too.
Okay. We're going to make a motion to task the airport staff to work with the air traffic control to formally designate the calm wind to evaluate formally designating a calm wind runway / direction procedure. Okay, to evaluate designating a calm wind runway / direction procedure. So the procedure would incorporate weather, night, all of those elements, okay?
And whether or not the tower was open, is that something under consideration?
Yeah. Well, that would all be considered that. They're going to come back to us with it. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay, we got through the first one.
Hold on a second. He's got to call the roll.
Call the roll now. So motion to task airport staff with, working with the air traffic control tower in order to formally designate calm wind direction and/or runway based on factors that are, the factors that are discovered once we make these.
So you're going to evaluate formally designating a calm wind runway / procedure. I'm sorry, a calm wind runway / direction procedure for implementation. Okay.
Do we have a time frame on that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it needs to be a trial, formally designate this runway / direction procedure for evaluation, a trial period evaluation.
60 days.
60, 90, whatever whatever those guys come up with. Come back to us with that, okay?
So you want us to come back to you with the results, or do you want to come back with a recommendation?
You're going to come back with a recommendation.
Okay. So April 25th is our next meeting. Okay.
That sounds good. You want to call the roll?
All right, Chair Dempsey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Starley,
Yes.
Member Lester,
Yes.
Member Mabe,
Yes.
Member Norval,
Yes.
Member Caudell.
Yes.
Congratulations. You get to do your first board formal activity. All right. All right. We have to be out of here by 4 o'clock, right? Okay. So we'll take our time and do them right. Item number 2 is raise the pattern altitude. Arvin, you want to give this one a little bit of introduction, set the table for us?
Yes, so the New Smyrna Beach airspace sits underneath Daytona Beach's airspace. So the shelf that we're under a 1,200-foot shelf of Daytona's airspace. That Daytona's airspace extends over New Smyrna beginning at 1,200 feet. So the current pattern altitude is 800 and I think some change. The consultant recommended that we raise it now. In talking with ATC and others, the understanding is probably that it was 800, just to allow that buffer between Daytona's airspace, but that is a 400-foot buffer. I spoke to flight standards with the FAA, and they gave me the procedures of how to request an altitude change for the traffic pattern altitude. That will be a study that they have to do, and they didn't give a time frame, but I imagine that it has to go through multiple departments, and they have to study, from the approach end of it, they have to study the different impacts that it would have. So even if we make the recommendation that we want to do that, it still is going to have to go be evaluated. What we don't know is how quickly then, if we had that change, how quickly we could revert to 800 if there was, an issue. They're going to study it from a safety standpoint, and so anyway, that would be the procedure in this particular case. Would be, if you all want to move in that direction, the next step would be that we would submit the paperwork with the FAA and begin the study.
And who pays for this study?
There's no cost.
Okay.
Okay. Discussion, questions for Arvin on this?
I have nothing because, my aircraft are not in the pattern. They just leave the pattern immediately and then come back eventually. I'm fine with 800 feet. My guys are fine. If they have to do work above the airport, they'll talk to Daytona and get 5,000 feet and just sit and loiter up there while they're flying. 800 feet sounds good. and there's more of a buffer between Daytona and New Smyrna.
Okay.
Jim, do you have thoughts on that?
My sense of it is we can make either one work. There is some value to the buffer, but it's not essential.
Okay.
And I think the idea makes sense to have the FAA look at it and have their analysis and then review it and say, okay, how's it fit? One concern that I go, well, you've got an airplane now in departure that's going to climb an additional 200 feet in the pattern. So that's 20% more noise at full power than you would otherwise have. So I really would have wanted to ask Mr. Arnold, what is that noise signature? How much difference does it make if that pattern is that aircraft is now on downwind at 1,000 feet versus 800? It clearly seems to me that we're going to extend the noise from the airport further because of the altitude. The airplane's going to fly a slightly different pattern because they're higher in the pattern. I'm not sure, but anything, the sad part about it is one of those is kind of hard to test, I think, because you have to get approval to do it. I would think with the FAA, we say, well, can we revert back on short notice? Since they've already looked at it once, they might be willing to agree to that if we say, this isn't really working like we thought. But we're certainly, at first blush, it's something we can do and have minimal impact on our traffic.
Okay. Any other questions for Jim? That's the concern I have with this one is there was not a lot of data that was provided by ESA when they presented this particular item to the commission. And I don't know that I heard them say that other airports have done this with success in their noise issues. I'm almost thinking that this might need to go back with you guys going back to ESA and say, how did you come up with this as a recommendation? Was it based on other airports that have implemented this type of increase to the pattern altitude? What were the results of that? Was there any negative results of that? My thinking is we need more information on this one before we tell you guys to go start the action with the FAA to do something.
So I did follow up with him, and I asked him, he didn't provide all that information, but he provided me with the information of what it happens is that when you do have a longer climb out, so there's the potential that would change for somebody who lives maybe further away who didn't hear it before. But what you definitely have is a reduction for people who, when the aircraft turns, it's now higher than it would be. So like typically, on climb out where you're not turning crosswind before, 200 feet before, 300 feet before traffic pattern altitude. So if that's the case, then there would be a reduction in noise for people underneath, and then certainly the rest of the traffic pattern, you're at a higher altitude. So I didn't specifically ask him what has happened when you've gone from one to the other, but he have many airports that have that, and that was why that was recommended.
Well, why don't we, the way that it's worded is pretty good. Airport work with ATC to determine the feasibility of raising it, okay? And the effectiveness, the feasibility and effectiveness of raising it, or impact of raising it. So, and then come back again at the April meeting and give us some feedback on that before we direct you to go and start the process of changing the altitude. Is that okay with you guys?
Sure.
If we put that together as a, okay, so can we get a motion?
So just to clarify, your motion is for us to coordinate with ESA to get more information to bring back to you for the next meeting.
On the feasibility and effectiveness, okay.
Somebody has to make the motion from the board first, and then we go from there.
Go ahead.
I hadn't considered until Jim's comment about it. It's probably negligible, but an airplane that's at 1,000 feet in the pattern is probably going to be a little further away from the airport than an airplane that's 800 feet. So that does spread it out just a tiny bit from looking at these noise rings on here. So that's something
Okay.
considered. But
Do you want to make the motion?
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Okay, Chair Dempsey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Starley,
Yes.
Member Lester,
Yes.
Member Mabe,
Yes.
Member Norval,
Yes.
Member Caudell.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on. Item number 3, simplify the voluntary noise abatement hours. They actually did a pretty good job of presenting voluntary noise abatement wording from a number of different airports in the presentation that ESA gave to the City Commission on the 27th. And ours does look a little convoluted compared to some of them that say, limited activity or no activity between this hour and this hour, that kind of thing. And ours goes on and on. I think that there's certainly an opportunity to take a look at the wording there and come up with something that is easier to understand and comply with. Any other?
What about daylight savings time? I mean, when the time changes, as far as, like we've got here from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., well, when daylight savings is in process, you have more light. I mean, you do. It doesn't get dark until what, like 8 o'clock?
Right.
30, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, is that a consideration?
Well, I think that it's prudent to review the wording that we have now and the hours that we have now and try and make that more concise and effective, okay? I'm not sure that their specific statement here, simplify the noise abatement hours, and then just simply say including between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. Those need to be determined, and the wording needs to be determined, and it's something that I think that we need to go and work on a little bit.
Well, we could do it 5 to 8, but I'm just throwing that out because there are people that come in.
Celeste,
fly in.
we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I'm just mentioning that because, well, I can use my own example. When I fly back here, sometimes, especially in daylight savings times, I don't get in here until like 8:30, and I'm not revving my engines or anything. I'm trying to land so that I can get home and relax. So I'm just throwing that out because the fact that, but it's okay. I mean, 5 to 8 is fine, but
The focus here is repetitive operations and touch and goes, I think is what we're focusing on there. We're not necessarily focusing on people that are coming back from a cross-country flight and they're returning at 8:39, whatever. The intent of this was to limit repetitive operations and touch and goes during a specific time frame to reduce the noise impact from the airport.
Could I speak a few minutes on this, or just real quickly?
Excuse
Could
me?
I speak a few minutes on this real quickly? Just
Sure.
to clarify. So you're absolutely right. It's focusing more on repetitive operations and touch and go. So the consultant did see, and when you look at the presentation that he did, there's a breakdown of similar airports. And one of the things that he mentioned is that we have one of the most restrictive noise abatement procedures already when it comes to the hours we're saying somebody can do touch and goes, repetitive traffic. So he wanted to make sure that, we understand that by doing that, you're putting all of your operations in one time. So all of this activity needs to get done. So if you shrink it more, it's very difficult to shrink it more. You can't really shrink it more. You're packing all the activities into one time period. So the goal, even though it may not be stated here in the same way, was to take a look at certain hours. Can we shift? Is there anything that could be shifted? Could this be better written? Because I'll give you an example right now of something that's confusing about the noise abatement. It says that you can, from 10 o'clock at night till 7 a.m., you don't do any repetitive stuff at all. You don't do touch and goes, you don't do taxi backs, anything like that. It requests that voluntarily. But at 7 a.m., you can start doing taxi backs, but you can't do touch and goes. And then at 8 o'clock, you can do touch and goes, and you can do everything else. So and then from 8 to 5, you can do anything you want, or not anything you want, but you can do touch and goes and taxi backs and everything repetitive. But then at 5 o'clock, we don't want you to do touch and goes anymore, but you can do taxi back. Well, that's not only confusing to pilots, it's also confusing to the residents who're just like, I can't tell the difference between a taxi back and a touch and go. So the whole idea was, is there a way to address everybody's concerns, still allow the students and everybody do what they need to do, and make it a little bit clearer and a little bit more concise?
Well, you, David and Gary, were part of this when this was created, right?
Yes.
Okay, you two guys were part of creating this, and it's had now several years to be experienced and validated in daily airport operations. I guess my question is that the wording that was used here that Arma was just talking about, where you've got this one from 10 to 7 and then from 5 to 8, is it prudent now to go back and see if there's a better way to word that to make it simpler and easier to understand for the airport users?
Yeah, clearly.
You think so?
Clearly
Okay.
there is, I think, yeah.
Okay. All
I
right.
think the question is, Arvin, what would you suggest? Do you have a suggestion?
Well, if I had a suggestion, but ultimately I really want, the users and your feedback, is that we extend the, say, no repetitive operations at all from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. So it gives you an extra hour in the morning for, a little bit less flight training operations in the morning. And potentially even at 5. See, we continue at 5, that's getting, we don't want to restrict it so much where, people aren't able to get their flight training in. So potentially taking it maybe even till 6 in the evening, so having a trade-off where people are still, coming home from work or whatever it is they need to do. And then that's one of the recommendations. It's just making it, reducing that complexity, especially in the morning there, between that 7 and 8 o'clock hour. That would be the lowest hanging, recommendation right off the bat that I would make.
Okay. All right, so I think we're going to wind up doing the same thing on this one. We're going to task the airport team to go and look at these procedures and the way that it's written now, and see if there is a way to, where is it? I'm not liking his words. I think that we should just task you guys to go and look at the voluntary noise abatement procedures to simplify and clarify the hours.
A flight training.
For flight-
So
for-
this is about flight training, so
And this is relative to repetitive operations and touch and goes, flight training, repetitive operations and touch and goes. Okay, so
Correct.
you guys are going to you're going to come
It has-
back to
yeah.
us in April and say, we think we need to move this from 7 to 8, we need to move this from 5 to 6, and you can bring it back and the board can review it and vote on it then. Okay.
My issue with that is, well, one, in simplifying noise abatement hours, the first word is discourage. Flight training operations, including repetitive operations and touch and goes, between 5 and 8. It's voluntary. So why send the airport management back to look at it and do another study? Just instead, it should say recommends the airport. We voluntarily ask you, please don't do repetitive flights at night. Putting all these different times in there of when you can do a touch and go, when you can do a taxi back, it just adds more to the mess. Just here it is. We would like you to do this voluntarily, and you leave it. Because if they want to do it, they're going to do it. they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it.
Well, I've got a question on that. Jim, right now, in regards to the flight school, are there allowed touch and goes? Do you guys give permission for touch and goes during the evening?
In general, the controller, again, it's voluntary. We have some flight schools that absolutely comply with it, and others don't. And frequently, we may tell some cleared land requesting touch and go. If we suddenly say we can't give you a touch and go, we've taken a voluntary noise abatement and made it mandatory. So it's a taboo for us to go there. Frequently, they'll say cleared for the option. It's on the pilot. I do believe it's worth getting the flight school, at least the local flight school, involved in all of these, because they may have some ideas. You know, they've been very great in complying, and they may say, hey, here's an idea we have. And I think if you give the burden on the first two, you know, tell the airport manager to go back and look at it, that doesn't keep him from talking to the flight school and seeing what their ideas are. But we have some flight schools that ignore it. And we have some flight schools, in particular our local flight school, they have incorporated it into their requirements. And I would say with very few exceptions, do they ever, I mean, they'll go doing full stop taxi backs till 8, from 7 till 8. And at 8 o'clock, if they're on a mile-and-a-half final, they'll say, can we make this a touch and go? You know, they're very careful not to violate the voluntary noise abatement. Does that answer the question?
It does. Thank you.
Arvin, when ESA came up with this recommendation to simplify, I'm trying to remember the verbiage that they were using that sent them in this direction, that came up with this wording that they came up with. I mean, my initial reaction to that was when I got the procedures back out again and was looking at them, they're a bit confusing. Okay, you can do this from 10 to 7, and you can do this from 5 to 8, but and then when I looked at the other airports across the state that they looked at, their voluntary procedures seem to be much more straightforward and simple language. Okay, although almost every one of them had time in there. They all had some time in there. My suggesting, and if I'm going to make a motion, it would be to go and review the procedures that we've got based on the feedback that we got from ESA, and do we need to make any changes to those? Okay.
Is that a clear
okay.
motion?
All right.
8 a.m.
So
seems
you're-
real,
oh, sorry.
8 a.m. seems reasonable to me in the morning. The 5 p.m., that gives me some pause. Like Celeste said, it's daylight till 9:30 or so in the summertime. And so I could see the flight schools feeling like they need a little bit more time late in the day, but
What if
8
the-
a.m. seems fine to me.
What if the airport put together a stakeholder group of flight school, you know, a couple T-hanger tenants, just multiple users, include the tower, and have a roundtable discussion, and we'll come back.
I think that would be great. Okay.
You want to make a motion to that effect, and we'll get a second and get it passed.
Yeah, I move that you put a group together of stakeholders and have a roundtable discussion which results in a recommendation, or if there are multiple recommendations, just bring it forward to us.
We have a second?
Second.
Who was the second?
Yes. Me. Okay.
Chair Dempsey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Starley,
Yes.
Member Lester,
Yes.
Member Mabe,
Yes?
Member Norval,
No.
Member Cardell.
Yes.
Okay. Then the motion carries. Okay, the next item is item 4, continue education and outreach with flight schools. That has...
Just took care of that, I think.
Yeah, well, we have a formal meeting with EPIC monthly.
Yes.
Okay? And I think that maybe we can tie 4 and 5 together, where we go ahead, they recommended adding noise to the regular meeting agenda. We actually have discussed it in every single meeting that I've been a part of in the couple of years that I've been involved with this advisory board. But I think we should formalize that, revise the AAB agenda to include noise, take it out of the airport manager's comments section, okay, or update, take it out of that, make it a formal line item in the agenda. And as part of that, you take the outreach that you're doing in education with the flight schools and incorporate that into that monthly agenda item with an update of your charts that you're providing of misbehaviors and total volume, traffic volume, that kind of thing. Put all that stuff that is normally being reported in the airport manager's comment section of the agenda, make that a formal section of the agenda, and we'll do number 4 and 5 jointly there. And I don't know that we need a motion to do that. We can just, do we need a motion to do that, or is that, because we're just formalizing a little bit of what we're already doing here?
Yeah, I can just tell you a little bit what we're doing now, and there's always room for improvement. So what we're doing now is monthly we meet with Epic, and we review all of the flight activities for the previous month. We go over all the violations, if you will, of the voluntary noise abatement, which they have made mandatory for their students. We've been doing this for a little over 12 months. So we also keep track of the records, you know, of touch and goes after hours and things of that nature. We also have a weekly safety meeting with all the surrounding airports and a lot of the large flight schools, such as Embry-Riddle, Epic, Phoenix East, Air America, all those schools which come here and do touch and goes. So on that call, if there's issues, we discuss, you know, I can bring that up as the New Smyrna Airport and bring up those issues to those schools. Sometimes most of the time it's safety related items, but that's also a forum where we talk about noise abatement. So there's actually weekly FaceTime or, you know, meetings with all the users.
I agree with you. I think we're in good shape with what we're doing now. I think we just need to make it more formal and make it a part of the agenda. Okay. So, you from rules of order here.
Yes.
Does that?
No, you can just give us direction that you'd like to include that in the next meeting, and we will.
Okay, so the direction for the next meeting is we're going to pull the education outreach with the flight schools from the manager's update PowerPoint presentation, make it a dedicated agenda item with its own separate position in the agenda of the AAB. Okay.
And next meeting will include the findings from our the direction that you've given us today as well.
Okay.
So noise will probably be a good portion of the next meeting as well, in addition to then providing updates on everything else.
Okay.
A lot of other activities.
So, exactly. So in the April meeting, the noise section of the AAB agenda, you guys will come back with your action on items 1, 2, and 3, and you'll put your regular reporting for item 4 in that agenda item as well. Okay?
Okay.
So you guys got that? Any questions
got it.
on what we want?
Not for me, no,
Okay.
sir.
All right. All right.
While we're on that, the 4 and 5, pick whatever one's easier, weekly or monthly. But how many noise complaint calls do you get weekly or monthly?
I'm going to say probably 10 a week.
How many different people are they from?
Probably 2, 3.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. Consider implementation of a disclosure or notification area. Okay. Arvin, would you like to set the table on that one and explain what EAS is trying to communicate there?
Yeah, one of the things that they brought up and they discussed at the last city commission meeting was the fact that there was about 1,000 homes sold in the last few years since COVID. A lot of those were sales that were sight unseen, that they were potentially not aware of some of the, or they weren't aware of how close they were. There was a gentleman who spoke at the last city commission meeting about the fact that he bought a home nearby and did not know how many aircraft there were. That's an item that I think the city has to look into, and we also obviously don't want to discourage somebody from buying a house that they wouldn't. But just another recommendation that he made there. But I know, of course, that's going to have its own. There's going to be sensitivity to that, of course. So there's pros and cons, but ultimately that'll have to be an action item that the city itself looks into. They have that authority, we don't, or they need to, just talk to realtors and things like that.
Okay, well,
Figure out how to do that. So
the commitment that was made on the 27th was that this group would go through these items and take a look at these next steps and recommendations. So we need to make a recommendation to the city, right?
That would be good, yes.
To consider implementation of a disclosure or notification area for properties around the airport or impacted by the airport.
Yeah, one of the things that the consultant did mention to us and to the commission was the fact that since we don't fall into the minimum threshold that the FAA considers to be noise, therefore we don't have any incompatible land uses. So the disclosure would have to be something of like a noise overlay, or it could be, the area of an airport, but it would not be a disclosure in the sense of, a noise, since it it's not over the DNL, 65 DNL is what they call, but it means basically that the average decibels day and night don't exceed 65. That's not to say it's not noisy or it's not irritating, but that's the way they determine it at this point. The FAA may change their criteria at some point in the future, but for the time being, that's the way they do it. So he recommended instead that they just decide how far away, if they wanted to do a disclosure, is it a mile from the airport, is it 2 miles, and that's something that they have to look into.
Okay, I guess then, when we're talking about implementation of a disclosure or notification area, is this something that by local jurisdiction, the city of New Smyrna puts this in place where this has to be done as part of the sale of a property?
Yeah, I can speak to that. It's a lot bigger than that. It's a lot bigger than actually the city of New Smyrna Beach. It actually has to do with the DBPR and the MLS boards regulations that have to comply with the RESPA. So it's much bigger than that. There's not an easy way to answer that because you're now talking national with NAR, you're talking with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, and with regulation within Tallahassee, within department licenses and MLS boards. So that would be where that direction that would go for any type of disclosure that would have to be given to a property buyer or seller. And just as a background, I am in real estate. So I know how that would have to go.
I was trying to remember this particular slide on 21 of the package that he gave to the commission where it talks about noise notification or disclosure. I don't remember him talking about other communities that have that.
I'll pull that up. So I believe he mentioned Orlando International is there to let me just scroll out.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And then also, was it Naples or some of those? So obviously those two communities have significant noise from jet, commercial jet traffic, or Naples is corporate. But so as you can see here, He just outlined just a couple bullet points, the benefits, the thresholds, and the alternatives, since we don't have the DNL 65. So he talked about an airport influence area. That was the term that he used. But again, yeah, Tim knows far more about that, so thank you for that feedback. So while we can make the recommendation, ultimately it's much bigger than us.
Well, given the fact of where our DNL numbers are now, is there any way that trying to go forward with anything like this is going to get any traction with the groups that you were talking about? MLS, national realty companies, those kinds of things.
Tim, you're not going to like this.
You're in a bad spot.
But with the difficulty you said it would be going through other organizations, is it because they're afraid to lose house sales and not disclose that, hey, people have complained in this area? I mean, when we had a noise board when we used to meet in the Utilities Commission, and the Vasquezes were there, and they do mainly, I guess, sugar mill. And it was brought up that we need to, disclose that this airport is so many miles within an airport. And the Vasquez's comment was, no, that'll never happen. We won't do it. You won't get anybody to agree with it.
So I have a completely different methodology. I started a real estate company because I hated real estate agents.
Prove us wrong.
Seriously. I wrote down a list of everything I hated about real estate agents, and I said, we're going to come up with a way to solve that problem, and we're going to design a company built on that, because they were all, what my experiences were not positive. In regards to what other people do, I can't speak to that, but what I can tell you is, in regards to, I believe that there should be disclosure from agents disclosing items that materially affect the value of a property. When I signed up to get a real estate license, one of the statements that I had to agree to was that anything that materially affects the value of a home, that I would disclose it if I knew about it. Things that affect the value of a home are railroad tracks, common sense things, airports. Those properties in those areas tend to not have a higher appreciation than a property that doesn't deal with that. Properties that are near a racetrack, things that create problems or things that annoy people. But the positive side is those properties are less expensive to get into for a homeowner. Mm-hmm. So there's a give and take, and there's a reality to price. Price differentiates and separates all things. I do think realtors should disclose that to their clients, that, hey, this is an area. I know that how we do business, I know that I've been a client before I was a realtor, and I know that I bought a home that I wish I never would have bought. And I had to deal with the consequences of purchasing that home, and it was very tough for me to sell, and I lost a considerable amount of money on it. So for our residents of New Smyrna Beach, that, this bothers them, I understand. It's a concern for me as a professional in the industry. However, the NAR, it's not necessarily as much about the sales as getting things changed. That's the hardest thing, because with the technology out there, there's so many boxes that have to be filled out when you list a home as a realtor, and to get compliance with all of the agencies to do what they're supposed to do, it doesn't happen. And if there's a realtor that doesn't have the highest ethical, moral compass, as maybe some should, we notice quite frequently that a lot of boxes don't get checked that should. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, for example, somebody will check that this home has a water view. It's a dang mud puddle.
It's a retention pond.
It rained, and there was a lot of water, and it has a water view. The craziest things I see. So to have somebody check that there's an airport, while our office would do that gladly, because I think that buyers have a right. I think that somebody that buys a home should know what they're buying. I think they should know that there's an airport, and you're either okay with it or you're not. For the people that have homes in high traffic areas where we have approaches, Our pilots need an approach, a safe approach to get into an airport. There's runways that 725 favor the winds here in our area. That's going to be the most used. I think I saw a report that said it's 60% of the traffic is 725. I think Jim would probably agree that's probably accurate. For the residents that live in that path, what they don't know, a lot of residents don't know because they're not pilots, is that approach extends out sometimes 20, 25 miles on approaches. And to set up for a safe approach, you have to fly that area to have a safe approach. And not all pilots are at the same level. So some pilots shoot an approach every time. So that blends the traffic. But to your point, to get compliance on a national level, it won't change because unfortunately it won't change because will it hurt sales? The argument would be yes, it will hurt sales, but I don't think that should be the argument. I think the argument should be we should disclose everything to buyers and sellers of rentals, but at the same time, a buyer has a responsibility of due diligence. It's also some accountability on a buyer's responsibility to also study where you're buying a home. You're spending a lot of money. I don't think we can get NAR or the MLS boards to change that box to say, hey, close to an airport, close to a railroad track, where a listing agent would actually check that. We could try it, but you would have to go to the DBPR and you'd have to go to the New Smyrna Beach MLS board, and the city can make that recommendation because of whatever our complaints are in this area to help our residents. And I'm all about helping our residents as much as we can within reality. But yeah, that would be a tough one.
Okay.
To make a change there, in other words.
I'm sorry. We're past the area of public participation right now, so we're going to continue with the discussion up here if you'll allow us to do that. All right. I think we need to come up with some approach that we go back to the city on this. Okay. I think the commissioners and the mayor are looking particularly on this one for this board to come back and say, here are maybe some approaches that you could take. Maybe one of them is an educational type of thing with the realty boards and MLS that we've done with Epic, with their operational side of it. Maybe there's something that could be done that where the airport staff, Arvin and Jacob, could go and meet with these folks and we could try that. Okay,
I'm sorry, I just had another thought. Another thing that I have seen in different communities that would probably be helpful is I travel a lot, and one of the things I've seen is when there are airports or there's higher noise areas, there's city signage that states that in those areas.
Okay.
And that's something that we could make a recommendation that the city put a sign up in these areas that are affected by the higher decibel levels as has come back. That may be a fair recommendation to make, to say, hey, can we look into actually having signs so that people that are buying in these areas, residents that are this is what you're buying when you buy that area. We can't fix, there's an airport here. The concrete's not coming up.
Exactly.
To remove that airport.
But I
we
think
can do other things to help notify.
There's somewhere in there's something that is kind of starting to gel here a little bit that could be things we could do, okay? And I think that this one's going to take a little bit more action on our part to come up with a direction or directions that we would go with this. Back to the city, back to the local MLS board, that kind of thing, and see what, maybe it's some combination of city signs, maybe it's that and education to the realtors, that kind of thing. So Arden, what was your thinking with this one as a direction to go with this? I think it's got to be a combination of noise and high complaint areas and max traffic areas where we look at that, what that pattern looks like, and we go back to the city with a recommendation that says, here are some avenues that we can take.
Yeah, maybe it's a two-part where it's make the motion to recommend this, that the city investigate and make the recommendations? I mean, you're probably the best one to make this motion out of anybody because you understand exactly how to word it, but
You
simplify
have
it
to be
and
very careful
include the
because-
signage.
Yeah, we can't, there's a federal law against steering. We can't steer away because think about the residents that own in the community surrounding the airport. I can't steer traffic away from that. That would be criminal to do that. But education is different, and that would have to come from the city level. So as a real estate company, we can't steer people.
Oh, no, I don't mean you in
But
that
on
capacity.
but on a city level, I could make a
Yeah.
motion and say, hey, I would like for the city to look into adding signage stating that this is a high noise area or a higher noise area. I can't recall, there's verbiage that I've seen, and I can't recall the exact verbiage in regards to noise area in different communities, but that may be a good suggestion that I would make a motion on to say, could we ask the city to look into putting signage around these areas that have the higher decibel levels that are the concern, or even where the higher complaints come from in our community. So
Make that motion.
Second it. I just think that's fantastic what you said, because we've got proof in all this right here about how many houses got sold in this area near the airport, and they're very upset, and we can only do so much with, our runways, our airplanes, our noise. We've tried and tried and tried and tried, to do things, to help people, to understand. So I commend you. I think that is an excellent idea, and I think the city will, I think they'll go for that, because we do get a lot of complaints all the time. Sorry.
Okay, so Jacob, you got the motion.
Yes, sir. It's a
Would you just read it back so we
motion
can?
to recommend to City Commission to add signage for high impacted areas for noise is to better educate those buying and those that live in the area.
And
Yeah.
Celeste seconded that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, Chair Dempsey,
yes.
Vice Chair Starley,
Yes.
Member Lester,
Yes.
Member Mabe,
Yes.
Member Norval,
Yes.
Member Caudell.
yes.
Okay. That gets us through the next steps and recommendations that we were tasked to come and review today. As much of that as you guys can get done by the next meeting would obviously be really good, so that we can then go back to the city with recommendations. Anything else, Arvin, from the airport side?
No, were there any further board comments about this or any other issue?
I was going to go to that next.
Oh, okay.
All right. Celeste, any additional comments? Or anything else we should add into this discussion?
I think what we have come up with is a great idea. I think that maybe we will be understood a little bit better, clearer for the public, and I think this is a right thing.
Okay.
I mean, we've got the FAA here that's, going to do his due diligence on things that we need help with. And I think this is going to help the city a lot.
Thank you. Gary?
Let me start. The one thing that bothers me is that the airport had to pay for this new noise study. And that should have been paid by the taxpayers, because they're the ones that are saying they have problems with noise. And we had to go and show them that there's no excessive DNL off the airport. So that shouldn't have been paid by the airport. It should have been paid by taxpayers. And I would have been one of them also. The airport isn't encroaching on anybody. The airport was built in the mid-30s, 9-hole golf course, circular turf, and New Smyrna Beach proper was Canal Street, 2 miles away. And over time, over 80-plus years, the city has encroached on the airport. The airport's never encroached on the city. And we've lost airport property because of that. And when the idea of the tower came about, people that were complaining about noise figured, well, we're putting in a control tower, and that's going to control our noise problem. And we kept telling them it's not going to cause, or it's not going to solve your problem. It's going to create more problems. No. It's going to control everything that goes over our house and all that. So they got their tower, and we got more busy. So I don't know. It just bothers me that, you know, the airport is not the problem. It's what the city has allowed to be built around the airport. Inlet Shores wasn't around. Islesboro wasn't around. Sugar Mill wasn't around. Terra Trails wasn't around. You know, so it's not the airport's problem. It's people that are moving in that have issues with airplane noise, I guess. I live on Pioneer Trail. I get all the runoff from 44, and nothing I can do about it. I picked the house there. I knew that it was going to happen, so I live with it. But
Okay.
anyway, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
As we're looking at these issues and the potential to impose operational constraints, for instance, our runway issue, our calm wind runway discussion, operational constraints tend to produce unintended consequences, and we have to be very, very careful in doing anything like that. Give it considerable study and a lot of thought. So I'll be looking forward to the research that's going to be done, and certainly the report. And again, as we consider what comes out of that, I think we have to be very, very careful in imposing any sort of operational constraint.
Couldn't agree more. David?
I have nothing further.
Tim?
I have nothing further.
I'd like to just say a couple things, if I can.
Go ahead.
So, as you probably know, and this goes to everybody in the community, I've spent a lot of time on this issue. A lot. Probably far more than most airport managers do. My primary role as an airport manager is to make sure that this airport is safe and that it is operating as a business, and that's what it is. Nevertheless, we have spent a lot of time on this issue because we want to be a good neighbor, and we're going to continue to work on it. But I think we have to always remember that safety is first, and that's safety of your residents as well. And we have to always keep that at the forefront. We will. And we are not going to, we cannot, there's certain things we cannot do, you know, so most of the things that we're talking about today are voluntary. You know, we don't have the authority to, like you said, constrain. We can't do that. That is against our grant assurances. It's a violation of our grant assurances, and, you know, the right for pilots to use the airport is the same right that a person has as to drive down I-95. It is the same right. It is a federally protected right. And I just want to assure, you know, Starlee mentioned something about constraint. We're very limited into the, you know, enforcement activities. So I appreciate the opportunity to continue to work on this issue, but we also have to make sure that we keep in our minds why we're really here. And we do have an obligation to the users and to the residents to make sure that we have safe operating airport. And anyway, that's all.
Thank you, Arvin. And now I'll close this out quickly from my comment standpoint. The City Commission decided, based on citizen feedback, that we should redo the noise survey, that we needed an update from the 2011 analysis, and that was paid for and that was done, and these are the results of that and the recommendations. And we've tasked the airport office to go and specifically look at calm wind runway direction procedures, the pattern altitude, if we can clarify or simplify the wording of the noise abatement to make it easier to comply with. But I think in every single one of those, we focus really heavily on don't screw it up. Okay, don't do anything that either makes it worse for this group over here or, God forbid, unsafe in any way whatsoever for the community or the operating community of airplanes that we have off the airport. We have to do all of this very deliberately, professionally, analytically, so that we don't mess anything up by monkeying with this stuff. So I'm just reiterating that again, so that for all of the stakeholders, whether it's Epic or FAA or the airport staff or airport tenants, we want to make sure we do this right. With that, I think we've achieved the objectives that we were given by the commission to come and review these items, and I'm going to close today's meeting.